Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. So on my Discord server, I have a section called the suggestion box, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a place where viewers and members can make suggestions about a whole host of topics, including topics they'd like to see covered in a future YouTube video. So I was looking through my suggestion box recently, and I came across this suggestion from one of my members, Jen, aka Plethora, who writes, she'd like to see more videos going over masteries and blessings and how to choose them for different types of champions and content like clan boss versus dungeons. Now, I thought this was a great idea. It's been a while since I've done any videos about masteries, so that's what we're going to do today. So for Plethora and any of you who would like a little bit more insight into how to choose your masteries for your champions, this video's got you covered. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Before we get going, just some quick channel business. Remember that I live stream every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. That is tomorrow, where I do my Takeover Tuesday live stream. I give away free takeovers to members of my Discord community. So if you're interested in watching takeovers or maybe getting a free takeover for yourself, you should join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much. Now let's get to the video. Okay, so here we are with the classic 3 mastery trees here: offense, defense, and support. This is for Athel, but they all look the same for every champion, obviously. Now, before we get started, I want to say a couple of things. There are no such things as perfect masteries. Masteries change based on the champion, based on the use for each champion, and even based on the place that you are in the game. So masteries that may have been perfect at one point for a specific champion will need to be changed later on when you repurpose that champion. Also, don't worry if you have suboptimal masteries unless you have made an absolutely major mistake in either missing a key mastery or choosing a mastery that gets you into trouble. We'll talk about some of those. You don't need to have perfect masteries in order for your champions to be effective. Early on in your account, even into the mid game, it takes a while to really understand all of the masteries. There are a lot of masteries here. So understanding how all 66 masteries work, it takes some time. Give yourself that time, read through the masteries frequently. Every time you choose your masteries, make sure that you are considering the opportunity cost of choosing a mastery. But in general, give yourself some leeway to learn. Okay, you don't need to have perfect masteries in order to get good work out of your champions. Remember that you get 1 free reroll for your masteries for completely free. You can also buy rerolls for gems later on. So you're not locked into these masteries. I wish you could just reroll them for free. That would be very friendly, but Plarium doesn't let us do that. I think that would give us more space to be creative about our builds. But for right now, we're just going to talk about some basics. I'm not even going to get into a lot of the different masteries. Like I said, there are 66 of them. I'm probably going to cover about 8. But I want to talk about the different trees, and I want to talk about the uses for those trees in terms of the types of champions that might choose different combos, and then the different fights that you might see those combos be effective in. I hope that made sense. So let's go ahead and start talking about the trees. Okay, so the one on the left here is called the offense tree. This is a bad name. In fact, most of these are named poorly. We don't want to call it the offense tree. That implies, I think it implies in some people's minds, attack, like that they have to be attack-based champions to go into the offense tree. This is more offense in the sense of damage. We should call this the damage tree. Remember that damage can come from sources other than the attack stat. So you have defensive-based damage dealers, you have HP-based damage dealers, you have debuff-based damage dealers like poisoners and HP burners. So there are other sources of damage. And this tree is the tree that you want to potentially select for any champion that needs to do damage. Now, that may depend upon the situation. So for instance, your healers rarely have to do damage. You might not think of like Apothecary as a damage dealing champion. But if you are putting him into a clan boss team, or if you are running him in dungeons a lot and you want to speed up the dungeon runs, then you may want to run him in the offense tree. The biggest most important characteristic of any tree is what we call the capstone masteries, the tier 6 masteries. So down here at the bottom, this final row, you can only choose one capstone mastery out of all 12 of these masteries for any given champion. Once you choose one, that locks you out from all of the others. Now, at the bottom of the offense tree, there are 2 capstone masteries that are very important in PvE content. One is called War Master, and the other one is called Giant Slayer. Now, these do damage based on the target's maximum HP. So in other words, when you're going up against clan boss, these do massive amounts of damage. And specifically putting Giant Slayer on Apothecary would be a very good choice if you're taking him into the Demon Lord clan boss fight, or really if you're taking him into any dungeon fight where you're trying to clear bosses. So these capstones help define what this tree is about. Basically, in any fight where time matters, or where maximum damage matters, you want to think about putting champions in the offense tree. Remember, that's the damage tree. And it doesn't matter what role they play. They could be a support, they could be a tank, they could be a buffer, they could be a debuffer, they could be a turn meter filler, they could be any kind of champion. If you need the team composition to do damage, you want to think about the offense tree specifically so you can get Giant Slayer or War Master. Now, there are other fights where speed is not a necessity. It doesn't matter how quickly you do damage, as long as you stay alive long enough to do damage. So Hydra clan boss is a little bit more like this. It's sort of in between. You still need to do enough damage to be able to rescue your champions who get devoured, but you also need to survive. Survivability is a key component. There are fights in Centranos and in Doom Tower where the key element of the fight is basically staying alive. You can think about champion fights or you can think about boss fights like Baumel, right? In Baumel's fight, you basically need to make sure that the dread bombs don't kill you. So if that's a condition of the fight that you're putting together your team for, or you're building your champion for, you may want to consider the defense tree. The defense tree is sort of the survivability tree or the tank tree. I like to think of it that way. This increases the individual champion's ability to survive, or the ability of a tank to help its team survive. Now, there are always some kind of specialty outlier masteries in these trees that you might use for other purposes, but as a general definition for the defense tree, we can think of it that way, that it is the tankiness or survivability tree. Now, this tree might pair up well with the offense tree. Remember, you get to pick 2 trees, but you only get 1 capstone. Now, the capstones in the defense tree that might be really important can be Bulwark. This is the tank capstone where decreases the damage all allies receive by 5%. This champion will receive that damage instead. It's literally like an ally protection where the champion with Bulwark just soaks up some of the damage that everybody else takes. So literally a tank capstone. You also have Fearsome Presence, which is the only way to increase the chance that you will land any of the hard CCs from skills or artifacts. So if you are running a stun set, or if you have a stun or provoke or fear champion who is not 100% certain to land those debuffs, you may want to run Fearsome Presence. Now, you don't need to go all the way to the capstone to get the values out of these trees. Sometimes the secondary tree is just a little bit supplemental. But again, if you're thinking about the defense tree, you're thinking about the survivability of the champion who's got the masteries on them, or the survivability of the team that a tank may be providing, or maybe even a reviver. A reviver may run down the defense tree so that they stay alive and have a better chance of reviving the team. All right, now let's talk about the support tree. So the support tree is actually, of all of the trees, it's the one that the 2 halves, the left side and the right side, are the most distinct. I think that in the offense tree, you have sort of a PvE side and a PvP side. In the defense tree, you sort of have a tankiness side and then a resist side, like a resist control side. But in the support tree, you literally have a healer side and a debuffer side. And so you're going to use the support tree a lot. A lot of champions are going to go into this tree. and the two sides are very distinct. Now, on the two sides, like I said, the left side is for healers. You're going to get all of the increased healing. So you get lay on hands, healing savior. You can even come down here to the very bottom and get additional HP, which often factors not in just survivability, but in healing. This side also works for shields as well. So if you have shielders or healers, sometimes even revivers might run in support down the left side. If you're going down the right side, this is the debuffer side. You are typically running accuracy, so you have 3 accuracy masteries. So ways to get additional accuracy. You also have the accuracy capstone all the way down here, Eagle Eye, which gives you 50 additional accuracy. Along the way, you have all sorts of turn meter manipulation. You also have Cycle of Magic, which I should point out. This is a chance to decrease the cooldown of a random skill by one cooldown, by 1 turn at the start of every turn. So there's a lot of utility in that tree. All your debuffers will run in the support tree. That includes any damage dealers who have debuffing responsibilities. So think about Fane in the clan boss. She needs to land her weaken, her decreased defense, her decreased attack, and her poisons. So she's going to run it in the offense tree because she's running clan boss and she's a damage dealer. And she's going to run in the support tree because she is a debuffer. Likewise, Wukong in arena. Wukong is a damage dealer, so he's going to run in the offense tree. And then he's also going to run in the support tree because he needs accuracy in order to strip the buffs off of the enemy. So the most common combo you're probably going to find is offense and support because you're going to use that in a lot of places. It's great against all boss fights, basically. And either you're going to get additional accuracy or additional healing and shielding, or even additional buff extensions or debuff extensions out of the support tree. Okay, so that's just a basic rundown of the trees. Now let's actually look at some champions and how I built them on my account. I'll kind of walk you through how to make decisions about which trees to choose for which champions based on how you're using those champions. Now let's start with the starter champions because I think this is a really interesting way to get introduced to masteries. The starter champions early on in your account are super flexible and they're really versatile. They cover a lot of roles. So early on, your starter champion, whoever you happen to choose, may be your campaign farmer, your clan boss damage dealer, maybe your clan boss debuffer, your dungeon carry, and your arena nuker. They can cover all of those roles. And as a result, you want to choose masteries for them that help them fulfill all of those roles. But each starter champion's a little bit different. Now we're going to start with Athel here because Athel was my starter champion. Or not on this account, but she's often my starter champion. She's my favorite starter champion. And I want to show you how I've built Athel here. Now remember, before we actually look at the masteries, that Athel does have an AoE nuke here, but she also has a weaken on her A1. So she is a debuffer, and that debuff is important. So when you are picking her masteries, you will often be picking with those two roles in mind. She's doing a debuff and she is a nuker. So as you can see, I've chosen the offense tree for her nuke capacity to like maximize her damage. And then I have chosen the support tree to make sure that she has enough accuracy to land her debuffs. Now, one of the things about a starter champion or any champion who does both damage and debuffs is that the stat requirement is very high for these champions. You need crit rate, you need crit damage, you need accuracy, you need speed, and you need attack. Now, the HP and defense are not irrelevant. It still matters. You still need to be survivable enough in certain cases, especially like in clan boss or against dungeon bosses. So the stat requirements are really, really high. And as a result, going into these two trees helps you quite a bit because these two trees give you stats. All the trees give you stats, but these two trees give you the stats that you need to make your job with your starter champion a little bit easier. So coming back here, you can see we have crit rate and crit damage right away in the offense tree. And we go down to the capstone here for War Master. Now this is War Master on this particular Athel. I actually usually run Giant Slayer. And the difference between War Master and Giant Slayer is just between single hits and multi-hits. If you average more than 2 hits per damaging attack, you want to go with Giant Slayer. If you average less than 2 hits per damaging attack, then you would go with War Master. Support tree, I've gone for some accuracy here, and I've also gone for Lore of Steel. Now, the nice thing about Lore of Steel is this basically just increases the stat gain you get from sets. So if you aren't using sets that give you stats, you don't want to go for Lore of Steel. But Lore of Steel can help you when you are using sets like Perception. So Perception gives you speed and accuracy, and Lore of Steel will increase the speed and accuracy that that set gives you. A set that wouldn't work with Lore of Mastery would be something like a Regeneration set. This heals by 15% every turn, but gives you no stats. So you get no benefit from Lore of Steel here. Also Frenzy, also Frost, also Cursed. All of the utility sets, stun sets, provoke sets, toxic sets. Also damage dealing sets like Savage. Savage give you no stats. They just ignore 25% of the enemy defense. So Lore of Steel does you no good at all when you're running a Savage set. So make sure that if you are going to get Lore of Steel, that you are doing that on a champion who is running sets that actually give stats as a set bonus. Now, all of these starters don't have their masteries complete, but you will see that anybody that uses a debuff, as does Kale, I'm going down the support tree. So support tree for landing poisons, we want that accuracy. And then again, all the starter champions should be in the offense tree. There's no reason for any primary damage dealer. If damage is the primary purpose of a champion, they should be in the offense tree because that is the damage tree. So it's always going to be red and blue for all of these champions. However, there's an exception, and that is Elhain. You'll notice that I've got Elhain in the offense tree and in the defense tree. Now, what makes her different than the rest of the starter champions? Well, it's basically that she has no debuffs whatsoever. She gets no value out of the increased accuracy. Likewise, she gets no value out of extra heals or extra shields, really. I could get a little value out of Lore of Steel if I were running her in all speed, let's say, or if I were running her in maybe like an offense set. So that is a consideration. But in general, I'm going to get more value out of running her in the defense tree. And basically what I've done here is I've gone for a build that just gives her a little bit more extra survivability, but also I've gone for Retribution, which gives her a chance to counterattack when she loses 25% of her max HP from a single attack. So I've gotten her a little bit more survivable, and I've gotten her to have a few extra ways to produce damage by going for the counterattacks in the defense tree. Now, this gives me a little bit of extra utility for a champion that doesn't need accuracy, that doesn't have debuffs. So now if we take a quick look at most of my damage dealers, these are all of my attack-based champions. And I want to show you how many of them are in offense and support. So I've got Wukong, obviously he needs accuracy. Alil doesn't actually need accuracy, but he has an increased chance of landing debuffs, and he gets some turn meter control out of this. We need accuracy here for bombs on Nishak. We need accuracy for HP burns. We need accuracy for HP burns. We need accuracy for freezes here. I've just started building my Yukaro, but offense and support. We need to strip buffs or affect turn meter or freeze people on Ray. You know, if we have poisons, you can see how many of these champions are in offense and support. And that's because of the accuracy requirement. So by going down the support tree, you actually get more stats than you would get from going down the defense tree that can help you do the secondary job of your champion. So the vast majority of my damage dealers go down offense and support, but not all of them, not every single one. It just happens to matter if they need accuracy. You can see most of them do need accuracy, but sometimes you come across a champion who does not need accuracy, like Elhain, like here, Trunda, where I don't care about accuracy on her. And so in this particular case, we can go with a little bit of extra survivability and a little bit of an extra chance to maybe counterattack on some of our damage dealers. But But attack-based damage dealers aren't the only ones who go down the offense tree. Here you can see I've got Ragash. He is a defensive-based damage dealer, and he is also going down the offense and support tree. Now, again, he does damage based on his defense stat, but his goal is still to do damage. And he has a debuff. He actually has two. He has a decreased defense and a stun in his kit. So again, this alleviates the burden by giving me free accuracy, and also I get more stats from Lore of Steel. So if he is running, in this case, speed set, he gets a little bit more speed here. Unfortunately, Lore of Steel doesn't affect his Relentless set, but I think I actually rebuilt that champion after I picked his Masteries. So the Relentless, unfortunately, isn't as useful with the Lore of Steel. But if I look at all of these defensive-based champions, a lot of them will be in the same exact trees as the attack-based champions, even tanks like Ultimate Death Knight. Now, Ultimate Death Knight doesn't need to be in the offense tree, but if you run him in any kind of boss fight, like if you're running him in Iron Twins, if you're running him in Clan Boss, if you're running him in dungeons, if you're running him against Doom Tower bosses, his natural tankiness may be enough that you don't need him in the defensive tree, and then going down the offense tree and getting War Master can speed up the fight that he's fighting. If you're running him in Arena, however, you might want him in the defense tree, and you don't need him in the offensive tree at all if you're not running him as a nuker. If you're running him pure tank, you probably want to go the defense tree as much as possible, and the support tree for extra shields and heals. So think about the purpose of your champion. Ultimate Death Knight is completely viable in all three pairings of mastery trees. You can run him offense defense, you can run him offense support, and you can run him defense support, and all three will work depending on your build, your team comp, and the fight you're running him in. So again, you want to be a little bit forgiving of yourself, that you don't need to pick the perfect masteries every time. You want to experiment and learn through using the different masteries and seeing how they affect the champions for the roles that you're putting them into. Newt, again, we have offense and support. And even survivability champs like defensive-based champs whose role is keeping the team alive, if they're used against bosses, you may want that War Master to speed up the fights. If you are struggling to survive, swap out of your offense tree and go defense and support. Here we go. Defense and support on Vizix, right? Because she doesn't really need to do damage in any of the fights that I have her in, but I need her to stay alive as much as possible. And therefore, I have gone into the defense and support tree. Okay, so these are the defensive-based champs. And again, it doesn't really matter if they're damage dealers like Newt or Ragash, if they're healers and revivers like Seal of the Drakes, or if they're utility champions like Vizix the Unbowed. You can see that the stat that defines their role, their defense role, isn't as important as the way that you use them in the team composition. So Helicath goes down the offense tree because he's in my clan boss team. Not because he's a damage dealer, not because he's an attack-based champion, but simply because that War Master provides a lot of extra damage for my clan boss team. Now, I don't have as many HP-based champions, but we're going to pull up some here. And you can see one of the key ones on my account is Artak, who's an HP burner. We have another HP burner who is Walking Tomb Drang. Now, HP burns are interesting because HP burns don't do extra damage based on the offense tree. So by going down the offensive tree, you're not actually getting a lot of extra damage for your HP burner. That doesn't mean you can't. If you have really good gear or your comp is such that you don't need any extra survivability at all, you could get a little bit of extra damage here. If you want to run a solo HP burner, like if you want to run Artak as a solo champion and he's going to be your dungeon solo champ and he needs to kill the bosses, then you might want to run him all the way down and get the War Master just for that extra damage so you speed up the runs. What I've done here is I use him in high-level Doom Tower, so I needed the extra accuracy, and I've got an Eagle Eye instead. You can see on Walking Tomb Drang, I've done the same, but rather than run him down the offense tree, I've actually run him down the defense tree and support tree because I use him in Sand Devil's Necropolis, and I need him as tanky as possible. So he does the primary damage that he does based on HP burns, so I just need to make sure to land the HP burns And I do have, for instance, Cycle of Magic, so I can get around to his HP burn or his burns a little bit faster. Now, for an HP-based damage dealer like Husk, I have gone down the offense tree because he does direct damage, not damage based on HP burns. So for poisoners, you may not run down the offense tree depending on how you use them, or you may still run down the offense tree to squeeze every last drop of damage that you can out of your champion. Remember, the real measure of whether you want to go offense tree or not is whether the fight needs to end relatively quickly, either because you just don't want it to take all day, or because the longer the fight extends, the more likely you are to die. So for instance, you don't want the spider boss fight to take very long because the spider gets more damage, like ramps up. Same thing with, say, Griffin boss in Doom Tower. You want to kill those bosses relatively quickly. And so in that case, survivability is more a matter of killing the boss first rather than outliving the boss. However, there are some fights where you just want to survive as long as possible, and that's going to take care of the fight, and that's when you want the defense tree. Okay, now let's finally take a look at some support champions. So support champions come in on all sorts of shapes and sizes. There are different kinds of support champions, and so there are different masteries for those different support champions. Let me start here with somebody who is an all-around support on my account. So this is Cardiel. You know, this is my favorite champion in the entire game and the most important champion on my account. So he goes in every boss fight. As a result, I have run him down the offense tree in order to pick up War Master. I've also actually, you can see I've even specialized in the offense tree. I've run down both halves here. So I want every source of damage I can get from Cardiel. Now you may ask why? Why do you want, isn't he a cleanser? Isn't he like a, you know, a healer? It's like, he is. And I get the masteries that I need for the healing here down the left side of the support tree. I don't need the accuracy. That's not a requirement for his kit. And he's not a reviver, so I don't have to worry about that. He has a revive on death, which can go on proactively. So instead, I want him doing damage because he has a join attack ability. 30% of the time, he's going to join the attack of an ally, and so he does damage. He also has cruelty to lower defense because he gets more attacks than anybody else. He's in my clan boss team, so he lowers the clan boss's defense, and he obviously gets attacks there. And I also want that War Master proc every time he joins an attack in addition to his own attacks. He actually does a ton of damage. You can see I run him with 100% crit rate and over 200% crit damage. And if I could fit more crit damage into his kit, I would. Now, you don't have to run Cardiel this way. You could run him super tanky, and that would also work. Running him tanky or running him in a damage build doesn't affect how much healing he does, right? He heals based on the max HP of his allies. So they get healed 7.5%. It actually scales up to 9%. So everybody gets healed by 9%. So it really depends on the fight. If I were going to run him primarily in arena, I would not worry about his damage. I would build him as tanky as humanly possible, and I would build him with a lot more resistance. And so in that particular case, you have an option to maybe come down the right side of the tree here, get resistance, and even end up with the extra resistance here with Unshakable. So if you have a cleanser, especially a PvP cleanser, you may want to go down the defense tree, whether you go defense and support or defense and offense. It's probably going to be defense and support. Now, again, you can see this in other champions that I've built for Arena. Here's my Arbiter. She is not in the offense tree. Here's Lady Kimmy. She is built for PvP. She is not in the offense tree. I also use her in PvP in high-end Doom Tower, so she needs a lot of accuracy. So I went down and got the Eagle Eye, and that works in both places. So that's, you know, it's both a PvP build and a PvE build. And you can see her accuracy is actually at 479 without the passives kicking in. So high accuracy there. Now, Arbiter doesn't need that level of accuracy. I've got her in Lore of Steel to get every last drop of speed out of her. I've got Spirit Haste to get every last drop of speed out of her because she is the team's reviver. And in fact, I've also got Timely Intervention so that when champions get low, she gets more turn meter fill. So she's got a chance to revive the team. And then I've got her in as many defensive masteries as possible. So again, the supports will, if they have debuffs, they're going to be in the support tree. If they don't have debuffs, or they don't have turn meter effect, or they don't have an instant effect that needs accuracy, then maybe you can take them out of the support tree if you don't have to worry about heals or anything like that. There are a few champions that you might run that way. So in this particular case, I have my solo champion. This is Venom Mage, who is built to solo Dragon and Ice Golem. Venom Mage needs accuracy, but I can get enough accuracy because the dungeons only require 225 accuracy. I don't need the 400 or 500 accuracy that you would need for Cintranos, for the high end of Doom Tower, and for PvP. So because the stat requirements are lower here in terms of accuracy, I can actually build this champion in regen and go ahead and put her into the defense tree. And then the offense tree allows the solo runs to go faster. War Master will clear the dungeons faster. Methodical will clear the dungeons faster because this is the only champion that's actually killing enemies. So by going this route, I make the runs not take as long, and that's important too. So again, if speed is an issue, the offense tree is a must. Now here's another solo champion. This is actually a solo champion for Baumel, Lady Annabelle. And you can see here, I've actually run her into the support tree. I could have built her the same way as Venom Mage and gone into the defense tree. I've actually seen Lady Annabelle's work in both ways. It's just dependent upon the gear that you have and what your stats are. So if you need to get more defensive survivability, you go in the defense tree. If you need to get more healing per turn because you have a large HP pool, you may want to go down the support tree for the extra healing on the left side of that tree. You can also go for Lore of Steel if you get any stats. Immortal does give 15% HP, and that's why she is also in the Lore of Steel mastery. Okay, so that is it. Basically, I went longer than I expected to, but when you have a whole host of champions, you're going to get plenty of opportunities to play around with the masteries. Don't be afraid to use your free reroll if you've decided that the original masteries that you've chosen for a champion just don't work either that well for the use that you've intended them for, or maybe you've repurposed a champion for a different role and now they need to have different masteries in order to be effective at that new role. And likewise, don't be afraid to spend gems on occasion to remaster your champions. It's one of the best uses for gems in the entire game. Gives you an opportunity to specialize champions as you build your roster. So generalists become specialists, specialists become refined as you learn more, and as a result, you will have to change masteries from time to time. So don't be afraid to try out a mastery build, see how it works, and then tweak it in the future. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions about specific masteries or about ways to approach masteries in general, please put those in the comments below. And likewise, if you've looked at some of my masteries during this video and be like, why the heck did he choose that? You can ask that question, but in a lot of cases, those masteries might have been chosen a year ago, or they might have been chosen a week ago, and they might reflect a different usage than you would put that champion to. So keep that in mind as well. All right, thanks so much for hanging out. I have been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.